Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. How are you guys?
Tired.
Tired, hey? It's hard work.
Yeah.
It's very hard work, we know. It's, yeah, it's, you know, it's that thing that we have to get through all the poses. And there's a lot to learn, but I promise you it gets better. I promise you, like I said yesterday, it'll tip over. So I'm just going to admit Alice in. There we go. It will tip. Big physical intensity at the beginning, and then it changes as we go along. Okay, it kind of gets a little bit more balanced. Okay. Anybody injured or any problems?
No.
No? You're all being clever and sensible and not going crazy?
My back muscles was just a little bit, I could feel that my back muscles was a bit tight, but I'm very aware of my lower back, so I could feel it's not an injury, it's more in the muscle.
It's more in the muscle. Okay, interesting observation as well, because that is something that we have to kind of be acutely aware of in our practice, and it's kind of difficult to tell sometimes when it's a muscular thing or when it's a joint thing or when it's a nerve thing, all of those things. It's complicated. But like I said yesterday, the absolute best way of telling is wait till tomorrow. And then normally, if it's a muscular thing, you know, if it's really bad, you're going to know immediately, right? We've all had something that's been really bad where you've got, oh, ow, 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 and you can't do things. But when it feels tense, we see what happens tomorrow and we take our time with it. And if it's gone tomorrow or at least lessened, we know, probably a bit of muscle stuff going on there, right? Good. Marley, you've got your hand up?
Yes, I just want to say that I'm actually surprised that I'm okay today, because yesterday afternoon I felt very broken. I was like, fuck it, tomorrow I'm not going to be able to do shit. I don't know what I'm going to do. That's how I felt. And I mean, I couldn't even drink wine. Like, I had my glass of wine. I'm like, I don't even want to do that.
I can't. Just holding it, yeah.
But yeah, I was really surprised this morning that I woke up and I wasn't, because your lower back, my lower back was also quite sore, but not sore that I can't walk, but yeah, it's a weird feeling. It's something to get used to. And yeah, this morning I was fine and I could do everything. So yeah, very surprised.
That's fantastic to hear. And you know, it's a real tricky thing when we do yoga classes as well, because often we haven't trained for particular movements. We haven't gone and done any other training outside. And then in a yoga class, you get thrown into all of these shapes, you know, bending backwards and bending forwards and twisting and doing strange arm balances and leg balances, and our body's not really that used to it. So we can get pulled around in quite a few different ways. And often when we get pulled around, so stretched or our muscles are shortening, we actually feel it the next day. We'll go, my hamstrings, you know, wow, I really feel my hamstrings today, or I feel my quads, like I was talking to you yesterday, my triceps. Oh, I feel that. But when we feel those things, we often just go, oh, I must have worked hard. We don't equate that pain, if you can call it pain, or discomfort, with anything injurious most of the time. We go, oh, we've worked hard, or my arms have worked, or, you know, I've worked hard. But the minute we feel things in our back, it's a different thing. Immediately our brains are on much more alert, going, oh, hang on a second, what is that? I'm not sure about it. We never go, it's like Annalise said, you know, hopefully, probably it was a muscular thing. So the muscles are working harder, but because it surrounds your spine, your nervous system to your brain, we never go, oh, I've just really worked my back muscles. Like we would say about our hamstrings, you know, and our hamstrings, we wouldn't really, you know, if you went and did bicep curls at the gym with a weight and your biceps were sore the next day, you'd just go, my biceps are sore. Cool. I must have worked hard. But the minute it happens with your back, we go, oh, whoa, and wisely so. You know, there's a reason that our brain reacts in this way. That, you know, it's all the new information on pain science. I don't want to go into it too much, but if any of you are geeks, Jenny Rawlings has got an amazing pain science course. And basically what it does is it tells us that pain isn't in your muscle or in your joint. It's coming from your brain. The muscle doesn't have pain. The tendon doesn't have pain. Nothing has. It's your brain feeling something and going, I don't like that. What are you doing? What are you doing? And sending a message to say, Annalise, Miley, stop. You can't have your wine. It's too much. Just wait. Okay. So pain works in a very curious way. It really is like that. It just goes, whoa, whoa, stop. Just stop. And then we find that when people have come to any exercise, yoga or otherwise, and they've had back problems, like proper back problems, they've had, or they've got scoliosis, or they've got significant issues going on, their brains are on even more alert, going, whoa, hang on a second, I do not want to go back to that place where I was 3 years ago. So their alarm systems will shout much more quickly than mine would, for example, okay? And that's why a lot of the time now that we find that strengthening, actually doing strength work. So in other words, if we were talking about the spine muscles, we were doing things like Shalabhasana, locust, lying on our tummy and lifting up like this, and even adding a weight and lifting up. Our backs, our brain likes it. It goes, interesting. No, that feels safe. Cool. And it switches off the pain signal. Okay, that's a very, very, very broad description of very much, you know, if you're injured, it's slightly different. But the brain likes strength work. It likes us. Laura's probably already told you, lowering slowly into chaturanga with those triceps working, and you going, and your brain going, I like this. This is good. I feel safe. So strength work is incredibly important. Annalise, you've got your hand up. Is it again, or was it the same hand?
Yes. So if somebody like had an injury before, like a bulging disc, whatever, is it then that it's going to be a problem forever, or not necessarily?
Do you mean the disc itself, or do you mean the mind?
I don't know.
It's an excellent question, because it actually crosses over with what we know with pain science now. So if somebody's had a disc problem, most disc problems heal in 6 weeks. Okay, that's it. They resolve. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Okay. So we also know that so many people have disc problems and they have no pain. Okay, so when they do these big studies out there, they look at 10,000 people, they will find that over say my age, in their 50s, 60% of them have some disc problem or a nerve compression, whatever, but actually most of those people don't feel any pain whatsoever. It's very, very complicated stuff. So we know that the discs heal, but if people have had serious pain because of a disc problem, for example, then their brains, their pain system, this is very broad description, their pain system is on alert. So if they came to a yoga class and twisted slightly, it would not be necessarily almost 100, no, let me go, 95% wouldn't be causing a disc problem. The disc is healed. But because their mind is going, I will never go to that place again, it creates a pain response. So with those people, the way of dealing with things is to, there's a lot of different ways, but is to slowly expose them to movement. So if their back hurts a little bit when they lift up like this, you just do less lifting up, right? We work differently with those people. And again, this is going to come up, it's a good point, Annalise, because this will come up later in the course when Taryn, who's an occupational health therapist, talks to you about injury. And it's something that we're very clear on and get you to think about a lot is, what is your role as a yoga teacher in terms of injury? Like, what is your role? How do you define your role as a yoga teacher? I'm not going to ask you right now because you've just started the course, but generally what we find is when we ask the 200 hours later in the course, most 200 hours say, no, I should be able to manage injury. Okay, I should be able to manage that person. I like Rowan's shaking of the head. I should be able to manage that person with the disc herniation. But we can't because we are not health practitioners. Okay? It's simple as that. We don't know what's going on with them. All we can do is go, Annalise, when you do this, does that hurt? And Annalise goes, yes. Okay, what happens when you do it 80%? Like you only lift a little bit. Does that hurt? No, that's fine. Only lift 80%. Okay, does 80% hurt? Okay, do less. And if the person cannot move, then you say, please go and see your health practitioner and don't come to my class because it's a very difficult thing to manage, especially around the area of disc injuries. Okay, so that was a little bit of a side track on pain science and things like that. So does anybody have any questions about the anatomy homework? Have you all gone and watched the videos? I like it. Clara's nodding and Elise is doing this. Rowan's
I didn't get through it all.
Totally,
I couldn't get through all of it.
totally
Yeah.
fine. You've got more time this afternoon. And you know what? It's one of those things that people say, you know, how much work do I have to put into the course outside of the session? And it's so difficult for me to say because it depends on you. So Nicole already has handed in her anatomy work last night, but Nicole's a doctor. So Nicole just went bang, 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 bang and handed it in. And now other people are going to take longer to process, to answer the questions, all of that. It's totally and utterly fine. Okay? You've got me pretty much on call to ask questions. You'll meet Taryn as well. She's very helpful, so is Laura. So you just ask away. Elaine, you've got your hand up.
Yes, no, thank you. Oh, sorry, my video is not on. My apologies.
No problem.
So yeah, it was basically the same question. Yeah, I mean, I just was trying to absorb as much as possible and just found it really difficult because there was so much talk about postures and names I was unfamiliar. And I think, you know, I got through about 4 or 5 anatomy videos and I just couldn't do more. And I didn't know if the expectation was for us to finish it all by today. And I was just very concerned if that was the case.
You must just, if you are concerned about things like that, you must send a message, okay? Because I will answer. So what I would like you to do is to get that anatomy work 1 in by, I think it's the 16th of February. Okay, that's your deadline. That's Tuesday or Wednesday time, okay? Don't think of it as a test. Think of it, because this is, you know, again, it's like this wide range of people on the course with different backgrounds and different levels of understanding of anatomy. So it's going to take some of you longer and some of you like this. It's totally fine. It takes a wee while to process, all right? Try and get your questions into me by the Tuesday or the Wednesday. And then it's not a drama to me if you've got sections that you haven't quite understood yet. I'll just ask you to go and watch the video again and have a little bit of think and guide you towards a certain, maybe have a look at this section a little bit more. I can see that you don't get it, so etc. So it's a guide, and this is all brand new. Yesterday was day one. So it's, you're doing poses, you're learning new names, huge amount of anatomy information, you're doing classes, different types of sequencing. It's huge. So it will start to sink in really slowly. And then if you're worried, please send me a message, okay? Or send Laura a message, or Taryn, it doesn't matter, okay? Send one of us a message saying, help, I'm a bit out of my depth here. Okay. Okay. Annalise, you got your hand up?
Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. With the homework,
yeah.
Regards to the homework and how you want us to submit it, how would you like us to submit it? Is it possible to do it online?
Just email
in
it.
An email.
Yeah, email it to me. It doesn't have to be beautiful. Just email it to me. You can even, I was going to say this, some people, if they, they had printed and then handwrite it, then you can take a photo of it. But if you do that, please send that to me by email, not WhatsApp, because it's so small on my phone. And I have to scroll from side to side trying to read your answers. But that's also cool. If you want to print it out and you want to handwrite it, take a screenshot of it or whatever, whatever works, send it to me by email. Okay, as long as I can read it, I'm totally fine. Okay. Okay. Clara.
No, I just wanted to share this app that I got. I wrote it in the chat as well, but it's kind of cool that you can kind of go into the different postures, and then when you click on it, it shows you the different core muscle groups that are used, and then you can kind of flip in and see from different angles. I think it makes it a lot easier because it's so visual.
What I want you to know, and I'll check out the app because there's so many of it, why I don't normally recommend apps is because often, and this is one of the videos that you'll watch with Jenny Rowlings, which is the yoga anatomy drawing app. And what it does is anatomy, and I'm not saying yours is, Clara, because I haven't looked at it, so I can't comment on that particular app. Often what they show you isn't right. It sounds really crazy, but it's not right. It'll say things like this muscle group is working. But in yoga, when you do a pose, the pose is literally normally from your fingers to your toes. Everything's working. Okay, so it can kind of get a little bit confusing, but again, it depends on the app. So I'm not terribly bothered about you knowing all the muscle names or anything like that. I've given you a very brief overview of muscles that I think you should know where they are. That's pretty much it. Because it's not important for me that you know that when you're standing on one leg, your glute max and glute medius muscle is working to keep you up there. I'm much more interested in you being able to look at the joint movements. So for the big movements. So if we were standing in Warrior 3, I don't care whether you know that glute max and glute med, which is your thumb muscle and your side muscle, is working in your standing leg. What I want you to know is what's happening with your standing leg when you're forward bending. Your hamstrings are being stretched. If somebody hasn't got flexible hamstrings, it's really hard for them to straighten their leg in Warrior 3. That's what I want you to know. Okay, I want you to understand that Warrior 3 requires hip flexion, which is hamstring stretching, and that in your sequence, so two things come out of it. One is pose analysis. So that's like, okay, Warrior 3, it's a balance. It's a hamstring focused pose. Your back leg is also hamstring working, but in a different way. Okay, but mostly it's a hamstring stretching pose. So the minute I start my class, if I get people to have their arms up in the air, folding forward into Uttanasana, standing forward fold, if somebody cannot touch the floor, rounds their spine, their hamstrings aren't that flexible. That person's going to have a harder time in Warrior 3. That's what I want you to know. Okay, I want you to directly relate the big movements in yoga to poses, to your own body, and if you go out and teach, to the student's body. So I want you to, then the big movements are, and you asked this in your anatomy work, by far the biggest movement in yoga, right, in terms of stretching, is hamstring stretching. Right? We all know that. Okay? Your hamstrings, the more flexible your hamstrings are in yoga, the easier a whole load of stuff is. Okay? From arm balances to what, and you'll start to understand this more and more. Okay? Hamstrings, big thing, right? When you watch the stretching video, you will understand the takeaways are that if you are going to teach hamstring work, like a maybe fairly difficult hamstring pose, you can warm your people up by doing hamstring stretches, and that's going to help them at the end of it to do a particular pose, right? The other big move in yoga is this: arms up, shoulder flexion, okay? Everything. What is the most common, what do you think is the most common pose taught in a yoga class? I said, Sinead?
Downward dog.
Downward dog, right? Pretty much the most common pose taught in a yoga class, not necessarily a hatha yoga class, the most common pose, right? Okay, the most common pose. Shoulder flexion, okay? What do our arms do in Warrior 2? Warrior 1, shoulder flexion. What do we do in, we use our arms unlike any other movement, okay? How many other types of movement besides gymnastics, which nobody past the age of like 60 does, right? Has us on our arms so much, right? Yoga, it's it. So these are your two biggest things in your, and I need you to know that. So I need you to know that having flexible hamstrings really helps you. To have strong shoulders really helps you so that you can assess poses that way. But really at the baseline, it's quite simple, okay? It gets a little bit more complicated. You'll see as you go, there's stuff happens with your hip and your spine, but you'll understand it. But I need these broad terms of understanding. I don't care if you know that when I do this, my tricep is what straightens my arm, okay? If you want to know that, I think that's fantastic, because that, but I want you to go, okay, what's happening in a handstand with my arms? What strength do I need in a handstand? You know, what strength, flexibility do I need in a forward bend, etc. So we're thinking on these very broad terms that we can apply to individual poses. Belinda, you have your hand up, and then Elaine.
I just quickly wanted to ask, with regards to the question that was sent on the WhatsApp group as well, with the muscle group and then having to name a pose that goes with that specific muscle. If we are not correctly on track, let's say in a specific movement for me, my hamstrings maybe feel like they're working more, but in actual fact, something else is working more. Will you guys then just guide us and say, that's not necessarily what needs to be looked at. It's just more based on the body than it is on the pose.
No, we're going to fail you, Belinda.
I'm scared for that.
Look, absolutely, this is a garbage, right? These anatomy work things are not tests. Okay? They are tests in a kind of assignment way that I do need you to get to a certain level of understanding for the course. You know, that's what I need. But it's my job and Laura's job and Taryn's job to guide you to that place. Okay? I'll get
Sorry. I just don't know if it's just me, but on that anatomy, on the muscle picture that we have in the course, or in the manual, I think it's in the manual, I can't find erector spinae. I don't know where.
Don't worry about it. Erector spinae, you can't see. They can't.
Okay.
Long lines underneath your back. That's all. Just Google as well. Physio, Google it. But it's
I
just
did Google it, so I just wanted to make sure if it's all right.
totally fine. And I can hear that you are, because you're concerned about these things. I'm not too bothered. I want you to go, okay, that's a bicep, that's a tricep. And then I will never ever speak of these things again. I want you to just go and try and find bits and pieces on your body so that you know. But you've been into yoga classes. Nobody uses the word tricep or the word erector spinae or any of those things. But what I want you to know is when you're in Warrior 3, what do you feel? You feel that your leg is being stretched. If your arms are out in front, you feel your back working. So back muscles working to hold you up there. So that's what I need you to know. And one of the easiest ways of doing it, and actually it's really, really good advice, came from BKS Iyengar himself. If you don't understand a concept in a pose, so an anatomical concept, or even why maybe you can't do the pose or your student can't do the pose, do the pose and then feel it, okay? Do your version of the pose and feel what's going on. If you're confused about the feel, this is the whole point. This is a yoga course. So it's not an anatomy course. It's a yoga course. I want you to feel. And from the feeling, you're going to create understanding of a whole heap of poses that you probably never even heard of before, okay? And because you're going to be teachers at the end of this, you'll be able to go out there and go, okay, I've got 10 people in my class. I can see, okay, I've just got them with their arms up in Tadasana. Oh, I can see that Ruan's shoulders are a little bit far forward. So that means that his shoulder flexion is not the greatest like mine. I'm not saying you are, Ruan. I haven't seen you practice. It doesn't matter. But that then you will know that when Ruan does a handstand or full wheel, it's going to look way different or be harder than somebody like Clara, who's really bendy, and her wheel will look totally different. Okay, that's what you will understand by the end of the course. Okay, so because that means then you can help yourself in terms of your poses and your practice, because how else in yoga are we going to get better? How are we going to progress if we do not understand the poses and we do not understand the flexibility requirements, the strength requirements, and also the skill, which you will learn when you start doing pose analysis, okay? Those are the 3 elements of a pose. We take a pose like crow, okay? Crow we can look at and go, okay, what flexibility do I need with crow? I mean, it's really just me in a little squat kind of thing. It's not a lot of flexibility needs there. I can get into Malasana squat. So I've got my flexibility sorted. What strength do I need for crow? Okay, this strength, arm strength, bent arm strength, kind of like a chaturanga, okay? Understanding how strong am I in chaturanga, okay? I don't need you to know that doing this is shoulder protraction, okay? I don't need you to know that, but what I need you to know is that's what strength that you require. Okay, without the big names. If you want to do big names, that's also cool, right? Then I want you to know that, okay, great, I've got the flexibility, I didn't have the strength, I've gone and done quite a few negative chaturangas to build up the strength, got the strength now, but still can't do the pose. Why? Because I don't quite understand where to put my shins on my upper arms. I don't understand, okay, I've got my shins on my upper arms, and now what? I need to lean forward because crow is a lever, like a seesaw. If you don't lean forward, your feet won't come up, etc. Ta-da, pose sorted, right? It's just training. We don't train in yoga. Yoga classes don't train us. If you were going to, if any of you have been to classes where they offer inversions, they normally just go, and arm balances, take crow if you can, otherwise just stay here and breathe are normally your options. We're trying to teach you a different way of saying you can create your vinyasa flow, that's the style that you want to teach, but that you can teach crow in your vinyasa flow. You can teach the flexibility needs, the strength needs, without even telling your people that you're doing that, and the skill needs. And that's what you're going to understand at the end of the course. Okay, I'm raveling. Elaine and then Miriam.
Thanks. Okay, so just something that was unclear in the manual is I just wonder if you could demonstrate supination and pronation.
Okay, don't worry about that. Basically, it is your hand and your feet supinates and pronates. Okay, so one is turning down, okay, and the other is turning up. Pretty much is all you need to know. Okay, so you know we talk about supine poses where you're lying on your back. Okay, so when I turn my hand down, I'm pronating. Okay, when I turn it up, I'm supinating. So supine, lying on your back. Okay, if I lie on my tummy, it's prone. Okay, it's just big words. You don't really need to know them. The pronation and supination is really much more on the 300-hour course, but you can think about it just in terms of, we would talk about your prone back bends. That means when you're lying on your tummy and you're doing poses like bow pose, where you're reaching back and you've got your feet over here. That's a prone back bend. When you're lying on your back and you're taking your leg up in the air, it's supine pose, it's lying on your back. Okay, don't worry too much in the feet because it even gets more complicated. There's eversion and invert, and it's like a whole story, all right? So that's really, you just need to know it from, and you will. Laura will say, right, today we're doing supine poses, and you'll all lie on your back for quite some time, okay? All right. Elaine, is that fine?
Yeah, and I suppose just the question I asked in the WhatsApp group, with that one question, are you looking for a singular pose that addresses all those muscles?
Singular pose.
Singular.
I didn't answer on the group. It's just a
single sorry.
Pose. No, it's really fine. It's just a single pose. If I'm asking what are the predominant muscles and I say hamstrings, I expect some kind of forward fold as an answer. Okay, pretty much. Okay, you can also think of hamstrings in a very different way, which is when you take your leg up and behind you, your hamstrings are working then too, so is your glute or whatever. So it can be one of the others, but predominantly in yoga, we don't do a lot of hamstring kind of strengthening. We do a lot of pulling of the hamstring. So just one pose, just so I can know that you kind of know that they are the predominant muscle in that group. But again, it's not a train smash, it's just guiding you. Okay, cool. Miriam?
Okay, so in the videos, there is at some point where you say that the muscle always returns to its original position.
Yes.
So does that nullify the whole concept of muscle toning? So I didn't understand, does it return to its position or size, as in it doesn't change shape or tone, or because you've always heard that sometimes that the benefits of yoga is muscle toning. So if the muscle is always going to return to its position, how does it tone?
Okay. It's a big question. I'm just getting my skeleton that's kind of broken away. Okay. So, Miriam, I hope you can see me because you haven't got your camera on. Okay, this is a bone, right? Okay, this is a bone, and I'm not going to bring my other skeleton here, all right? This is your thigh, okay? This is the ball that fits into your hip. So this is your thigh, and it goes into your hip here, right? This is, you can see, this is your knee, okay? Your hamstrings attach, and I'll stand up and show you. There is a video showing this as well. Your hamstrings, hang on, let me just Okay, everybody can see me? Your hamstrings, there we go. Can you see the bone? Okay, this is your hip bone. This is my knee facing forward. My hamstrings attach to a bone in my pelvis here, and they attach to the back of my knee, okay? They attach along, so basically they attach to two bones. Okay, they attach to my pelvis and they attach below my knee, but they're attached to bone, okay? So that is the length, pretty much, I haven't got the pelvis here, of your hamstring forever, okay? It cannot get any longer and it can't get any shorter because it's determined by your bones. Does that make sense, Miriam?
Okay. Yes.
So it never gets longer. It is always, there we go. It is always, hang on, it's been my video there. It is always determined by your bone. If I look at my biceps here, they attach in to my elbow and they attach, and there's two of them actually, but they attach up here. The length of my arm, my upper arm, will never change, ever, okay? Unless somebody snaps it in half and breaks it, okay? It's never gonna change. So my muscle length never changes, okay? But the muscle itself changes inside in lots and lots of very complicated ways, which will be in the strength video, but it's very complex stuff, right? Little proteins inside react to it and react to load. So you walking when you're a baby, to you taking a bicep curl and a bicep weight and doing this a lot, okay? The muscle changes inside. So, and it becomes sometimes, depending on what we do, slightly bigger, but it never becomes longer or shorter. Okay, so the tone, I think, Miriam, you're saying, is that, you know, if I went and did bicep curls, my bicep would make a little bump, okay? And there, that would be, I presume, just tell me if I'm not getting the right, I'm not understanding correctly, that would be the tone. But in terms of length, when you stretch a muscle, it always goes back to its bone length, its resting length, okay? Miriam?
Yeah, I hear you.
Does it make sense, or am I answering the question that you had?
Yes, you did. I understand that it doesn't change in length, but within itself, like in the width, that's where all the protein action happens.
Yes, it's so complicated. It happens in little things, and I don't want to geek out here because I just love all this stuff, okay? So it happens in little things called sarcomeres. And in your bicep muscle, I'm not sure, I don't want to exaggerate, I think there's about 100,000 of them, or 250,000, I can't remember, it's in some video, okay? There's a lot. And it happens in those little things, okay? Proteins change shape. It's actually called the sliding filament theory. It does this and makes cross bridges and changes what I think you're referring to as tone of your muscle, okay? So your muscle does change, but it never changes. The whole point is that, you know, I ask you the 4 properties of muscle, and one of them is extensibility. And extensibility means, like, if you've got a TheraBand and you stretch it and you let it go, it comes back. It's like elastic, but your muscles aren't quite elastic, they're viscoelastic. So it stretches, and then it comes back. So you can't overstretch your muscles. They don't go all floppy and fall off at the end of them, okay? Just not how stuff works, okay? Is that okay, Miriam? Do you have another?
Perfect.
Okay, great, okay.
Yeah, I saw Ruan's comment as well. Thanks, Ruan.
Okay, great. I can't see the comments because I haven't got the chat up, so Michaela.
So just to add on with Miriam, so I actually got confused when she asked, because I thought, so I understand a lot more now. What would we then say if someone has tight hamstrings and someone has loose hamstrings, like if a muscle's more flexible as opposed to tight, what's happening there?
Okay, so
muscle?
I'm going to throw it back at you, and I'm going to go, because you kind of answered your own question. How do we judge this? What would we say? If Belinda, when she folds forward into a standing forward fold, wide-legged forward fold, and Belinda can literally compress her torso on her thighs like this, and then Marley actually only gets down a certain bit and then starts to really round his spine and can hardly touch the floor, but can touch the floor. And then we have Ari, who can't even touch the floor. How would we describe their hamstrings? You said it.
I would. The one's flexible, tight. The other one's tight, the one's flexible.
People use the word tight all the time. It's totally fine. It's not really accurate, but it doesn't matter. I personally don't like, I still use it because it's an old habit. I try really hard not to, because I think it's quite, when we say tight to people, it's kind of a little bit judgmental. I find it quite judgy. I try, and I fail all the time, to say really flexible, average flexibility, less flexible. Not so flexy is probably my most common thing. So because I was watching, I'm going to post as well, you guys will watch it, it's a video I've done on Bakasana. And it's this, what I want you guys to kind of reframe is to think of things like how flexible your hamstrings are, and like who can do what pose in a range. That there's no absolute, there's no, I can do Bakasana, I can't do Bakasana, okay? Crow pose. Marley can touch her toes, I can't touch my toes. There's a range, okay? There's nobody here that can't fold forward to some degree. So it's just a range. It's just that person's much more flexy than the other person. It's the same thing as Bakasana. Someone who's beginning Bakasana crow pose may not be able to get their feet off the ground, neither of them, but they're in the shape and they lean forward. They're just in the range of crow pose. They're just in the range of progressing to getting another pose. It's just a range, because with something like crow pose, it can be you starting your feet on the floor with Malasana to some crazy crow pose on, you know, from a headstand into it. There's a range, okay, of pose. So to think of things in range, but they are, in terms of flexibility, less flexible, not flexible, those kind of things, very flexible, you know. And what we do know is that what we think, because it's all theory, stretching is really complex stuff, right? Mainly because they can't sort of rip open people's muscles and go, that's exactly what's happening when they've all done forward bends for a week. Okay, we're not allowed to do that, sadly. Okay, so it's like, but what they think, there's two theories, but with the main theory is called stretch tolerance theory. First of all, you know now from the videos, bones get in the way, right? If your bones are shaped a certain way, you're not going to be able to do a certain thing. People's vertebrae, their spine bones, you know, some people have ones quite close to each other. Other people like Laura have ones like way far apart. They can bend backwards more. And there's nothing you can do because their bones in the way, right? So bones play a huge part in flexibility. But beyond that, if we're just talking muscle, we're talking mostly stretch tolerance, which means it goes back to the pain science stuff that I was yakking on about at the beginning of the course. Your brain tells you when to stop. You know, most of you will know that feeling where you've stretched your hamstring and you've gone a little bit too far and it feels like you want to vomit. It's so sore or so, because it's not coming from your muscle. Your muscle doesn't feel anything. It's coming from your brain going, what on earth are you doing, you stupid person, in a yoga class, stretching like that? Your leg's going to fall off. Stop that. Okay? So it's coming from the mind. So there's huge theories around stretch tolerance. And what they've shown, it's brilliant. I'll try and find you the videos. They've done it on mostly American football players who've had massive injury and then they can't move properly and they got tight, that kind of thing. When they go in for ops and undergo anesthetic, different types of anesthetic, then what they do is they move the person's legs all around the place because the anesthetic's taken your brain out of it. And then the person can do all the stretches because the pain is not there. So that shows us that the bones weren't in the way, the ligaments weren't in the way, and that what was stopping the person was feeling sore. Okay? And it's a natural part of our system. We can never override it completely, but we can certainly work with it with load and trying to do that. So it's quite tricky stuff, but it doesn't mean that if Sinead is super, super, super flexy in her hamstrings, that Ari's going to be super, super flexy if we keep stretching him a lot. Okay, just not how our bodies work. We work differently. It's tricky, I know. Good question, though. Who was it? I got Belinda and then Miriam.
So when you were talking about forward folds now, it actually reminded me of what I wanted to ask yesterday. Watching the videos and the way that you do the poses in different positions, and us also doing it on the mat and doing crow pose this morning while we're in the lying on our back or whatever, really got me thinking. But then I was wondering why, when I am in a forward fold, I can completely put my upper body against my thighs and I can fold completely. But when I'm in a seated forward fold, I can't seem to get that same action of going completely down. Is it because of the seat, or is it because, I'm just trying to figure out where is my flexion or what is my ability, because it doesn't really make sense how I can do it in one position but not in a different one. And just wanting to know how to work on that.
Does anybody know why, if you're lying on your back and you're not using your hands and you make a crow shape, that most of the time you can't get your thighs right against your chest, but if you're coming into crow or just squatting down into malasana squat, you can get your chest on your thighs? Does anyone know?
Is it because of gravity?
More than gravity. Gravity, yes, but something more than gravity. It's the way that...
Is it your organs are in the way? There's no space for them to move, no?
No, same shape, same shape. It's load, okay? So when we come down, when we're lying on our back, we're not using our hands to pull our legs in, because if you were lying on your back and you pulled your legs in, you'd get the same shape, right? You're forcing it in. So the pull is load. It's you pulling, which is always, it's a load moving towards your chest. When we come into forward folds or anything, from up here down, we've got the whole weight of our torso, our head, our arms to squish. So it's gravity and you is what's happening, okay? It's the same, the force is the same. If I pull my legs in, that's a force. I'm pulling in, I'm adding load by pulling it in. And I'm doing the same thing by using gravity and lying if you think about how much your upper body and your head and your arms weigh, I'm lying a weight on top. So then it allows me to squish. The same thing if I put I haven't got anything heavy at hand, I have to get up again. If I put a piece of paper in my hand and then I just lower, I can just drop it, right? I can lower really quickly. But if I've got a weight, okay, a big heavy weight, and I let it go, it's going to smash down, okay? It's literally the force, the load has squished you into the position. And because you're not using your hands to add force to bring yourself in, it's much harder. So that means you're really having to work what muscles we call hip flexor muscles and your abs to draw in from an internal contraction. So that's why it's also what you will see in the pose analysis is that often It's much easier for people to do, I wouldn't say much easier, it's easier for people to do standing forward folds than it is to do seated forward folds, okay? Because of load, because of gravity. A lot of the time people will come, especially people that aren't so flexy. Hey, look at me, I use the right words, Michaela. Okay, so not so flexy. When they sit down and they try to do a forward bend, their spine will round and everything's just ab work trying to get there. But if you stand them up and they fold forward, they're not going to get that much further. It just feels like they are. Plus, they've got the weight of their torso pulling them down. So it feels better, not all the time better, but 90% of the time it feels better. Whereas seated is really challenging for people who aren't so flexy in the hamstring. Only really flexible hamstring people like forward folds when they're seated. Everyone else hates them and they're useless. So it's advantageous to use that load to create squish, basically. Is that okay?
Yes, with that being said, does that nervous system that sets in also play a role then? Because if I were then to pull myself, but the pain feels more like in a seated, if you kind of can keep on doing that until you've reached a different like limit with more weight or with more of a pull, you'll be able to go beyond that. Am I understanding it correct?
Are you referring to the forward folds, the seated forward folds? And yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Look, it's quite a challenging thing to get more flexibility. What the research shows that pretty much all sorts of flexibility work will make you more flexible. There's this thing in, I don't know if I mentioned it in the videos, I can't remember. There's this general term called the SAGE principle. It's called specific adaptations to imposed demands. It means basically if you want to do something, do a lot of it. It's like, so if you're going to forward bend all the time, you will increase your flexibility range through tolerance. Okay, there are two main ways to do it that are effective: static stretching, which is you holding positions, but you have to hold for so long it's boring. Okay, no one does it, they hate it. So, and it's only the only benefit of it is that you will get more flexible. Whereas when we do loaded stretching work, so that's stretching work with weights or with resistance bands, not only are we gaining flexibility range, probably the same as static stretching, way quicker. You can just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 done. Okay, it's way quicker. And because you're adding load, your muscle is getting stronger, your tendons are getting stronger, your nervous system is going, cool, I like this is safe. So it's got a whole heap of benefits. So for me, like that, if I want to get more flexible, that's how I get more flexible, is adding weight. And then definitely the nerve, I mean, you can't go mad, you have to start slow, but it's sooner or later you can actually drop hold huge weights, and it increases your flexibility a lot. But mostly because your brain is going, and then that's okay. I'm in control folding forward, not pulling and pulling and pulling. I'm in control. Brain likes to be in control, so you don't rip your leg off, basically, at the end of it. It doesn't want
you so much.
It's a pleasure, sweetie. Okay, Miriam?
You might have answered this about when you were talking about flexibility.
Yeah.
But my question is more on range of motion.
Yes.
Can range of motion be improved? So, for example, if someone cannot do splits and they want to work towards doing the splits, is that possible? Or is it a whole thing of your hips can't move that way and they will never move to the way that you want them to move?
It depends, Miriam. It depends on the individual. It's that when I talk about the hips in the videos, let's use splits as an example. The way your hip socket and your leg is shaped is going to determine, first and foremost, right? It's the most important determination of whether or not you're going to be able to do splits. Right? if your hip socket, because hip sockets space all over the place and they're totally different from side to side. There's no such thing as symmetry, right? We are not symmetrical. We're just not. So if your hip socket is facing forward, you've got a much better chance of doing splits, forward splits anyway. If your hip socket is sideways and really open, then you do it in the video, then you can move your leg all around it. If your hip socket is facing backwards or very small, so here's the head of my leg, you can all see it. If my hip socket is like that, okay, clunk, crash, clunk, crash. Nothing you can do about it, okay? So first and foremost, it's bones, right? A little bit of ligaments definitely as well, especially with the back leg, but bones. But if we work on flexibility and we see the range getting better and better and better and better and better, then we maybe know that bones aren't actually what's causing us from not being able to do splits. Okay? But splits are quite complicated because you've got one leg going forward and one leg going backwards. So your hip socket's got to be like a really happy hip socket to be able to do both of those moves. Okay? And some people it just is what it is, which I also quite like in a way. It's like, it is what it is, so what? You can't do splits, move on to something else. But splits, I am not impressed by flexibility. Because if you're flexible, you're just flexible. It's like, it's just there. I'm so much more impressed by strength in flexibility, okay? Much more impressed by strength, because we all have to build strength. It doesn't just come, the guys get it a little bit easier than us, not fair, in the upper body, but it really is, we can get strong. And what I love about strength, and I bat on about it on my Instagram page, is that if you want to do a particular pose, it does not matter how big you are, if you've never exercised in your life before, if it's a strength requirement, right, you can get that strong. You get strong enough for you. And the great thing about strength, anybody that's done any strength training, if you go and do 8 weeks, twice a week of arm strength training with some weights, you will be so strong at the end of 8 weeks, right? Like crazy, it's so much stronger. It happens quickly and we just keep going with it. So splits, I would first of all look at the person's shape. It's very different. We can't tell what your bones look like unless you go for an x-ray. I don't know what your bones look like. Normally, people who are very close to doing splits, say you were about this much off the floor, then I would look and go, oh, let's see. Let's do some flexibility work, some loaded flexibility work at home. Then you can do all your yoga and things, and see if you get further down. But if somebody's this high off the floor, then I'd be going, chances are it's a bone thing, okay? So it's really difficult for us to tell. You kind of have to do the work and then you can improve the range of motion. But the range of motion, if the bones are in the way, like the two vertebrae, the spine bones, once bone is in bone, put your knuckles together, that's it, it's done. So sorry, I always give terribly long answers, as you know, but I hope that explains, Miriam. I got a thumbs up, yay. Who was first? I've got two hands up, Elaine and, oh, Ruan. Let me go to Ruan, he has an answer, and then Elaine to you.
Hi. I just wanted to clarify some information that I put in the chat because I know you didn't see that. So I just don't want to give anybody bad information. It's just when Miriam was talking about toning, I kind of interpreted it as mostly when people talk about toning, they're talking about like growing muscles and like becoming stronger and things like that. So I said progressive overload stimulates muscle hypertrophy, which is growing the muscle, but the muscle stays the same length because of where it obviously attaches to the bones. And then I remember your video from last night where you were showing with the elastic band. That's why I said it's elastic, but you also clarified it's not actually elastic. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that point so people don't get wrong information.
Perfect, because that's what it is progressive overloading. So, and it's a specific way that people train to not only get bigger, hypertrophy, as Roanne cleverly said, but also to get stronger. And the two aren't necessarily the same. It's what, you know, we often see women don't get as big as men get because we don't have testosterone to, you know, the huge degree that guys have, but we can get epically strong. It doesn't mean that we necessarily get bigger. You know, people, when I say, oh, you know, this is the weights that I lift, they're like, oh, why aren't your arms really big? And I'm like, I'm a girl. It's like, it's almost impossible for us to get huge without like really taking other stuff, supplements, and not supplements, like scary stuff. You know, it's really difficult for us to get strong. So we build strength in a different way. And that sounded like a perfect answer. Yeah, elastic it is. We are viscoelastic. I don't know how many of you have seen it. We like a gummy bear. So it's literally like we stretch and then we slowly go back. Okay, muscles are very clever things, but we're not elastic by itself, because if we were elastic, like an elastic band, not even a TheraBand, if we pull it too much, it goes and breaks. Okay, it returns very quickly. We don't return that quickly. This is really complex stuff. You don't really need to know this. We return much slower. So I think it's in the stretching video, there's an example of a story, and it's to do with the back, where it's an airport in Canada, I can't remember it, but with their long distance planes that arrive, you know, when you've been on a plane for 12 hours or the like, they actually move their carousels not move their carousels, they make people walk much longer than you normally would have to, because what they were finding was people were getting straight off the plane and picking up their bags after having sat in this shape for a long time, and their muscles, the viscoelasticity, which means when your muscles come back to their normal shape, hadn't had a chance to just come back. So they made the carousel where the luggage is much further away, so that the person would walk, and then the viscoelasticity, the muscles go back to its normal rate, because it happens slowly, and then they're able to pick up bags and bits and pieces. So it happens slowly that the muscles go back. And some of you may have had that experience when you've done that, perhaps a hot yoga class or done a lot of hamstring stretching. You're like, whoa, I feel really flexible. And then it takes a little time for the muscle to go, oh, go, and goes back again to its resting state. Okay, Elaine.
Thanks. Sorry, it's a bit of a selfish question, but I'm just very curious about splits. So if you can forward split, would that mean that you could sideways split? And another question is, so I can forward split, but, well, I can almost forward split. It's just that my shins are a little bit crooked. So
I need a picture. I want to see what crooked shins look like. That sounds super cool. I want crooked shins.
Well, they're not straight, my legs, yeah, but I've got at least in the hip, you know, yeah. So I'm hoping there's hope.
So answer to your question is no. For the first question is, it just because you can forward splits doesn't mean that you can side split. So I can forward split. It's not the greatest forward split, but also because I've been doing other work in the opposite way. If I sort of worked it a little bit more for a week or so to be back to normal, but I can't side split. Yeah, I can get fairly low, but I can feel it's my bone. It's like, oh, it's like pinching stuff, like not stretching. There's no feeling of stretch. There's just bone pinching, probably my labrum, which is, you know, cartilage around the bone and things like that. So sadly, no. Again, side splits, normally you've got a very shallow hip socket, which is a lot of the rhythmic gymnasts have, dancers, they have naturally got that shape. And also if they start young enough, they almost mold that shape, okay, because it changes over the years. That our pelvis, women's pelvis is 3 bones when we are preteen, and then hormones start and those 3 bones fuse, and those 3 bones fusing causes the shape of the socket. Okay, so if it's fusing at the time that you're doing rhythmic gymnastics and ballet, it might, depending on, you really have to be doing a lot of it, it might fuse in a wider shape. Okay, but you have to, that's like serious, you'd have to be training fully. But it just fuses in a shape, and it fuses because we load, because we're walking, okay, and growing and getting bigger and adding more weight, and then we get a particular shape. So that. The crooked shins, I would love to see a picture. I'm skewed slightly in my splits. I don't care because I'm so over caring about these things. So it's like, I'm just pleased that I did my first splits at 44. And it was actually an interesting thing. I used to go with 3 other yoga teachers to a private yoga session on a Friday afternoon. And I had taught on this particular week, I'd never been able to do splits before, fairly close, but never. This particular week, I had taught 27 hours of yoga classes and privates. And I went to my private on the Friday afternoon. Yeah, I want to go do my practice. I was finished. And I just thought, you know what, just go and just see just do whatever you feel like doing, like no fuss, because I was quite like, well, I still am a bit, like really try hard and stuff like that. And then for some reason, the teacher, he taught splits, and I just went bang and went into splits for the first time ever, like just and sunk down into splits. And I think looking back on it now, it's because my brain got out of the way. Okay, I wasn't paying very much attention. My muscles weren't going, I wasn't trying to force anything, which means when you force a hamstring stretch, the muscle sends a message to your brain going, you are forcing a hamstring stretch. Your brain then sends a message back going, stop it, you stupid, stupid woman. Okay, stop that. Right? But because I wasn't paying any attention and not trying, bang, off I went into it. And that often happens is another way of working forward folding as well, but again, it takes ages, is to do static stretching, but you go so slowly forward. And the minute you feel something, you stop and you back off a little bit. It takes ages, but you'll be surprised how much further you can go because your brain has not been alerted to pain or that you're doing anything dangerous. It doesn't like you doing dangerous stuff. It doesn't know, your brain doesn't know you're stretching your hamstrings in a yoga class. It's got no idea, right? It just gets alerted to senses of force. So it just goes a pull. Our muscles, whether they stretch or they do this, are pulling. They're always under what we call tensile load, tension, and our brain is alert to that. Just like what's happening? Don't do it. You know. Again, it's a pain science thing. It's the reason why a paper cut is really, really, really sore. And you look at it and you go, but it's just a paper. How can something this small be this sore? Okay, it's because your brain doesn't know it's a paper cut. It's just getting messages from these little receptors going, ow, ow, ow. Okay, or not even ow. That is, a slice has happened, and your brain goes, oh, send messages, stop her bleeding to death, kind of thing. So it's a complicated topic, but stretching, yeah, if you're very close to the ground, you can try middle splits, but middle splits is much more prohibitive bone-wise than forward splits. Forward splits, we can do quite a few tricks to get away with it. Right, guys, I am conscious of the time and I don't want to keep you. It's already 3:08. Does anybody have any other questions, or would you like to all go and watch me on anatomy videos? Again. You all go. Oh, Elaine's got another question.
Yeah, so just to confirm, so is it all the stretching videos as well? Sorry, I was just...
It's all listed in your schedule. It'll say exactly there, all the stretch. So it's strength, stretching, general anatomy, those 3 portions. And then there's Jenny Rowling's, I think, edition. It's in your schedule. Yeah. Amy?
Hello, I just wanted to ask with regards to the Instagram, is it in the stories or is it on the like feed, or where do we find those videos?
On the post. It's my last post of today. It's just a little bit on Bakasana, or in fact there are 2 posts on Bakasana where you put your arms. Okay, so have a look at that. And then when I get around, I'm very bad at Instagram. I really hate posting on it, so I've got to like get it in the right frame. I'm too old for Instagram, but one has to have it nowadays. But so I'm going to do another post of your pose analysis by Kasna, and then you can watch that as well. But you guys have got it online, so that's going to tell you everything you need to know about Crow and how you get into it if you're not into it already, how you get better at it, what happens with your students, all of those things. But when you get to pose analysis, I think I've broken down 24 poses. There's another, I'm hoping to do another 3 or 4 tomorrow. There's probably going to be 28 poses, and it's all broken down into flexibility, strength, skill, and progressions of the pose. And I'd like you to go away today thinking, try to think in terms of range, okay? In terms of if you can't do something yet, except if it's middle splits and your bones are in the way, you're just in a range of a pose, okay? How can you work to maybe improve in terms of flexibility, skill, and strength of the pose? If you can't touch your toes, you're just in a range, okay? It's just a range. None of you are the same. None of you, okay? It's just ranges, and we can work in those ranges. And as teachers, if you're going to teach when you're out there, all of your students are going to be in ranges too, and it's all fine, okay? It's all excellent, actually. You know, and it is this one thing that, you know, some people that are very flexible might not be that strong. Some people that can't touch their toes can balance on one arm. You know, it's all good stuff. All right. Are you ready to go now? Okay. Off you go. Have a good week. Please send me questions if you've got any. Of course, you know, we'll sort everything out. Okay. Don't worry. Just do the work. That's all you have to do. All right. All right, guys. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye. Well done on your first weekend.